My dear friends, welcome back to our humble abode, where the kettle is always warm and the mysteries, as you know, are always exceptionally cold. Today, we embark on a journey into the labyrinthine alleys and grand boulevard of London, a city both majestic and menacing, especially when shadows lengthen and secrets stir. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, have the distinct honor of recounting another of my esteemed friend Hercule Poirot's unparalleled triumphs, a case where time itself seemed to conspire, or perhaps merely whisper a truth only he could discern. Before we delve into the heart of this enigma, I must, of course, extend a warm invitation. Do subscribe to the channel, for there are many more tales of deduction and drama waiting to be unveiled. Now let's begin with the first chapter of The Clock That Died at 9. Chapter 1. The Stillness of Cavendish Square. It was a Tuesday of unseasonable warmth for late October, the kind of day that felt like a final, wistful sigh from summer before the true chill of autumn descended. My friend, Hercule Poirot, was meticulously polishing his patent leather boots, a ritual he performed with the solemnity of a high priest when the urgent summons arrived. A scrawled note, delivered by a breathless young constable, spoke of an incident at number 14 Cavendish Square, the residence of Lord Ashworth, a respected, if somewhat reclusive, antiquarian. "Ah, Hastings," Poirot remarked, holding up a boot to admire its mirror-like sheen. "It appears London calls for our little grey cells once more. Let us hope this incident is not merely the misplacement of a valuable postage stamp, eh?" Within the hour, we found ourselves alighting from a hansom cab before a formidable Georgian townhouse, its red brick facade sombre and imposing against the bruised twilight sky. A single gas lamp flickered by the heavy oak door, casting dancing shadows. The air, despite the earlier warmth, had grown heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and an unspoken dread. Uniformed constables were already at work, their measured movements a stark contrast to the urgency of the summons. Inspector Japp, his familiar face etched with concern, met us in the marble-tiled hall. "Poirot, Hastings," Japp greeted, his voice low. "A grim business, I'm afraid. Lord Ashworth has been found lifeless in his study. No signs of struggle, but, well, it's peculiar, Poirot, very peculiar indeed." He led us down a hushed corridor, past a grand staircase draped with an ornate runner to a heavy oak door. The study itself was a sanctuary of old-world charm, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes, their titles hinting at ancient histories and obscure philosophies. A magnificent mahogany desk dominated the room, cluttered with papers, quills, and a half-finished game of solitaire. In the high-backed armchair before the cold fireplace sat Lord Ashworth, a man in his late 60s, impeccably dressed in a velvet smoking jacket. His spectacles were askew, and a half-smoked pipe lay beside his hand on a small side table. He seemed merely to be asleep, albeit in an unnervingly deep slumber. Poirot, however, surveyed the scene with an intensity that missed nothing. His eyes, keen and sharp, moved from the victim's posture to the contents of the desk, lingered on a scattered deck of cards, and then, inevitably, settled upon the mantelpiece. "Ah," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The clock. Perched amidst a collection of ancient Egyptian artifacts was an elegant gilded mantel clock, its ornate hands frozen precisely at 9 o'clock. The pendulum was still. "That's the thing, Poirot," Japp said, following his gaze. "The servants, a Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, and a young footman, George, found him this morning. They said Lord Ashworth was always particular about that clock. Kept it wound like clockwork. Forgive the pun. Never known it to stop before." Poirot approached the mantelpiece, his gaze dissecting the clock. He did not touch it, merely observed. 9 o'clock, he repeated thoughtfully. "Morning or evening, mon ami?" Japp shrugged, running a hand through his thinning hair. No one can say. The doctor reckons he passed some time last night, but couldn't be more specific without an autopsy. No obvious cause of death, no wounds, no poison suspected yet, just collapsed. Peaceful, almost, if it weren't for the circumstances. A quiet sob drew our attention to the doorway. A woman in a black dress, her face swollen with weeping, stood clutching a handkerchief. This was Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, a woman of severe but respectable demeanor, now utterly undone. Beside her stood a younger man, pale and anxious, clearly the footman, George. Such a good man, Lord Ashworth was, Mrs. Gable choked out. Always so precise. Everything had its place. To think he's gone. Mrs. Gable, Poirot said gently, turning to her. When did you last see Lord Ashworth alive? She dabbed at her eyes. Last night, sir. I brought him his usual cocoa just after 10:30. He was here in the study playing his solitaire. The fire was lit. He seemed quite himself. Spoke of an early meeting this morning. And the clock? Poirot inquired, his eyes still on the gilded timepiece. Always working, sir, she insisted. Always chimed the hour. When George went to wake him this morning and found him like that, the clock was stopped. Never happened before, not in 20 years. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And did anyone visit Lord Ashworth last night after you brought his cocoa? Mrs. Gable hesitated. Well, not that I know of, sir. I retired to my room. George would have heard the front door, wouldn't you, George? The footman, a lanky young man with a nervous twitch, stammered, Yes, ma'am, I heard nothing. Slept soundly, I did. Didn't hear the bell or the knocker. Poirot's gaze drifted back to the still figure in the armchair, then to the unlit fireplace, and finally, once more, to the clock. 9 o'clock, he murmured again, a faint frown creasing his brow. The time, she speaks, Hastings. But what is it, she says? Japp looked bewildered. It says someone stopped the clock, Poirot, or that it just ran down. But why? And why at 9? Poirot merely hummed a low, thoughtful sound. The silence of the stately room, broken only by the distant clatter of a hansom cab on the square outside, seemed to deepen around the profound stillness of Lord Ashworth and the silent witness of the clock. This was not a simple death, I felt with a chill. This was a puzzle crafted by a cunning hand, and only Poirot's unique genius could hope to unravel it. The mystery of the stopped clock was merely the first enigmatic piece. Chapter 2. Whispers at Paddington Station. The morning after our grim discovery, a dense, swirling fog had descended upon London, turning familiar streets into spectral avenues. It muffled the usual cacophony of the city, lending an ethereal, almost secretive quality to the ordinary comings and goings. Poirot, ever particular about the weather, declared it unconducive to the proper functioning of the little grey cells, but nonetheless insisted we pursue a lead that had emerged overnight. A telegram, found on Lord Ashworth's desk, indicated a scheduled meeting with a Mr. Silas Croft, a prominent financier, at Paddington Station, set for early this very morning. Mon ami, Poirot explained as our hansom cab navigated the pearly grey gloom. Lord Ashworth spoke to Mrs. Gable of an early meeting. This telegram suggests it was with Monsieur Croft. If Croft arrived and Lord Ashworth did not, it would be most enlightening to know his movements and observations. Paddington Station, despite the fog, was a hive of muffled activity. The vast glass and iron canopy, usually a beacon of light, now diffused the weak morning sun into a milky haze. Steam billowed from the locomotives, momentarily coalescing into ghostly shapes before dissipating into the heavy air. The scent of coal smoke mingled with damp wool and cheap coffee. Porters hustled. Passengers, their faces obscured by the mist, hurried towards their trains, their voices hushed like conspirators. We found Mr. Silas Croft waiting impatiently by the platform for the Cornish Riviera Express. He was a man of imposing stature, with a florid face and a stiff, immaculate bowler hat perched squarely on his head. He clutched a leather briefcase with an air of barely contained vexation. He did not look like a man accustomed to being kept waiting. "Mr. Croft?" Poirot asked, his voice cutting through the subdued din. "Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We are inquiring into the unfortunate passing of Lord Ashworth." Croft's eyes, a steely grey, narrowed. "Ashworth? Good heavens. Passed away, you say? Why, I was expecting him here for a very important transaction this morning. He never showed. Most unlike him indeed. What happened?" Poirot observed him closely, noting the slight tremor in his hand as he adjusted his grip on the briefcase. "That is precisely what we are endeavouring to ascertain, monsieur. When were you last in communication with Lord Ashworth?" "Yesterday afternoon," Croft replied, his voice gruff. "Sent him a telegram confirming our meeting for 9 this morning. Sharp. We had a substantial deal pending involving a rare collection of ancient coins he was keen to acquire. Time sensitive, you understand?" 9 o'clock, Poirot repeated, a familiar flicker in his eyes. The same hour as the stopped clock in his study. Croft frowned. "A stopped clock? What has that to do with anything? The man was old, wasn't he? Heart failure, I suppose. Sad, but hardly a mystery." "Perhaps," Poirot said smoothly, "or perhaps not. Did you by any chance visit Lord Ashworth at his residence yesterday evening, Monsieur Croft?" Croft bristled. "Certainly not. I was at my club, the Athenaeum, from 7 until late. Had dinner, played a hand of whist. Several gentlemen can vouch for my presence. Came straight here from my lodgings this morning. Expected to finalize the deal, not hear of his demise." "And the collection of coins?" Poirot pressed. "How valuable were they, precisely?" Croft hesitated, his gaze darting to the bustling platform. "Exceedingly valuable. Enough to make a man wealthy for life if he played his cards right. Ashworth was an astute collector, knew their worth." "And did he ever speak of any rivals for this collection? Or perhaps enemies?" Croft scoffed. "Ashworth wasn't the type to have enemies, just competitors. Other collectors always sniffing around his acquisitions. There was one fellow, a young chap. Rather aggressive, I hear. Name was Mr. Edgar Thorne. A bit of a new money upstart, if you ask me. Always trying to muscle in on the older collector's territory. Ashworth had a particular dislike for him, I recall." As Croft spoke, Poirot's eyes had been scanning the platform, not fixed on the financier, but on the periphery. He noticed a woman, elegantly dressed but with an air of quiet despair, sitting alone on a bench, occasionally dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Then his gaze snapped to a detail on the ground, a small, dark stain near Croft's polished boots. He bent slightly, discreetly examining it. It appeared to be a smudge of what looked like coal dust, but mixed with something else, a faint metallic sheen. "Thank you, Monsieur Croft," Poirot said, straightening up. "Your information has been most instructive. We shall not detain you further from your journey." As Croft, clearly relieved, hurried towards his compartment, Poirot nudged the stain with the tip of his boot. "Hastings, observe, Monsieur Croft, a financier of impeccable taste, with a smudge of what appears to be dockside grime on his otherwise spotless shoe. And his story of being at his club until late. Most convenient, no?" "You think he's lying about his alibi, Poirot?" I asked, bewildered. "But why would he have been at the docks? And what about this Edgar Thorne?" Poirot merely smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "The world, mon ami, is a stage upon which many actors play their parts. Monsieur Croft, I think, has a supporting role that he wishes to keep hidden, and the name of Monsieur Thorne, that too will require our attention. The fog, Hastings, she conceals much, but not from the careful eye. The train station, it is a place of departures, yes, but also of secrets that arrive unseen. The mournful whistle of the Cornish Riviera Express echoed through the station, and the massive train began to slowly pull away, carrying Mr. Silas Croft and his secrets into the misty distance. Poirot, however, seemed more interested in the small metallic flecks embedded in the coal dust. A new trail, faint but distinct, had been laid. Chapter 3. The scent of lavender in Covent Garden. The oppressive fog of the previous day had lifted, replaced by a bracing, crisp morning air, though a hint of lingering dampness still clung to the cobblestones. Poirot, invigorated by the change, decided our next destination should be Covent Garden Market, a vibrant riot of colour and sound that stood in stark contrast to the subdued elegance of Cavendish Square and the industrial solemnity of Paddington. He was particularly interested in a theory he had developed regarding Lord Ashworth's early meeting and a potential delivery. The late Lord Ashworth, Hastings, Poirot expounded as we navigated the bustling market aisles, was an antiquarian, a connoisseur. He lived amidst beauty and rarity. It stands to reason that any significant acquisition, especially one of ancient coins, as Monsieur Croft described, would be handled with discretion and perhaps even a touch of ceremony. And where better to arrange a discreet delivery than through a network that handles all manner of goods? The market was a sensory explosion. Flower sellers called out their wares, their stalls ablaze with roses, lilies, and chrysanthemums. Fruit and vegetable vendors stacked their produce in pyramids of vibrant hues. The air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers, ripe fruit, and roasting coffee, punctuated by the raucous cries of hawkers and the melodious calls of street musicians. Poirot, however, walked with a focused determination, his gaze sweeping over the faces in the crowd, listening to snippets of conversation. Our particular quarry was a Mrs. Eliza Thorne, listed in Lord Ashworth's personal ledger as a supplier of rare floral specimens and, curiously, a discreet messenger service. We found her stall nestled between a bustling fishmonger and a theatrical costumer, a small oasis of delicate blooms and fragrant herbs. Mrs. Thorne was a woman of ample proportions and even ampler good humour, her face a mass of cheerful wrinkles, framed by a cascade of unruly grey curls. She was arranging a bouquet of lavender, her fingers surprisingly nimble. "Good morning, Mrs. Thorne," Poirot greeted, with a polite bow. "Hercule Poirot, and my friend, Captain Hastings. We are making inquiries on behalf of the late Lord Ashworth." Mrs. Thorne gasped, dropping a sprig of lavender. "Lord Ashworth? Oh, dear me. I'd heard whispers, but I prayed they weren't true. Such a gentleman he was. Always particular about his night-blooming jasmine. Bless his soul." Her eyes welled with tears. "What a tragedy." "Indeed, madam," Poirot said gently. "We understand you occasionally assisted Lord Ashworth with certain deliveries. Did you by any chance receive any instructions from him for a delivery or collection this past Monday evening, or perhaps early Tuesday morning?" Mrs. Thorne dabbed her eyes with the corner of her apron. "Well, bless you, sir. Yes, I did. A message came yesterday morning, a rather urgent one. Lord Ashworth required a small, heavy package to be picked up from a private address in Wapping, a Mr. Silas Croft's private warehouse, he specified, and delivered to him at Cavendish Square by 9 o'clock this morning. He said it was of the utmost importance, and that I should use my most reliable fellow." Poirot's eyes gleamed. 9 o'clock, the very hour. "And the package?" I interjected, a sudden thought striking me. "Did it contain ancient coins?" Mrs. Thorne looked thoughtful. "He didn't say, sir, only that it was heavy and delicate. I dispatched young Thomas, my most trustworthy lad, bright and early. He's usually back by now. He takes the river barge. You see, cuts through the traffic." "And did Lord Ashworth mention a Monsieur Edgar Thorne?" Poirot asked, seemingly out of the blue, his gaze sharp. Mrs. Thorne's cheerful expression momentarily faltered. A shadow, fleeting but distinct, crossed her face. Edgar. Why, that's my nephew, sir. A good boy, but ambitious. Bit too keen on making his mark in the antiquities trade, if you ask me. Has a bit of a rivalry with some of the older collectors. Why do you ask about Edgar? Poirot merely gave a non-committal hum. Just a name that arose in our inquiries. Does he ever assist you with your delivery service, Mrs. Thorne? Not usually with Lord Ashworth's special items, she replied, regaining her composure. Edgar mostly deals with art auctions and private sales for himself. He sees himself above running errands, bless his cotton socks, but he knows all the warehouses down by the docks, he does. Just then, a scrawny young man with a ruddy face and a cap pushed back on his head hurried up to the stall, breathless. This was Thomas, the delivery boy. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm back," he panted, setting down a small, empty canvas sack. "But it's most peculiar. I went to Mr. Croft's warehouse in Wapping just like Lord Ashworth said, but it was empty, not a soul. The door was unlocked, though. I waited and waited, but there was nothing there to collect." "Nothing." Mrs. Thorne looked bewildered. "Empty." But Lord Ashworth was so specific. Poirot stepped forward. "Empty, you say, Thomas? No sign of a package or even a recent presence?" "No, sir. Just a few crates, mostly empty. And a funny smell like old metal and salt, like the river, you know." Thomas rubbed his nose. "I waited until well past 9, then came back. Figured Lord Ashworth must have made other arrangements." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "So, Lord Ashworth arranged for a delivery that did not exist from a warehouse that was apparently deserted, at precisely 9 o'clock this morning. And Monsieur Croft tells us he was expecting Lord Ashworth at Paddington at 9 o'clock for a transaction involving ancient coins he wished to acquire. A contradiction, mon ami, a profound contradiction." He turned back to Mrs. Thorne. "One final question, madam. Did Lord Ashworth ever discuss a secret safe or a hidden compartment, perhaps within his library or study?" Mrs. Thorne's brow furrowed in thought. "A secret safe? Well, he never spoke of such a thing to me directly, sir. But I do recall him once mentioning years ago, when he was having some work done on the house, that he had a rather clever hiding place for his most treasured possessions. Said it was somewhere no one would ever think to look." Poirot nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. The scents of lavender and mystery hung heavy in the vibrant air of Covent Garden. The early meeting seemed to have been a carefully orchestrated deception, and the promised coins a phantom. But the purpose of this elaborate charade and its connection to the silent clock remained tantalizingly out of reach. We had a new player in the form of Edgar Thorne, and a very peculiar rendezvous at a riverside warehouse. The stage was growing crowded. Chapter 4. Echoes in the British Museum. Reading Room. The grandeur of the British Museum's reading room offered a sanctuary of hushed reverence, a world away from the clamour of Covent Garden. Here, under the magnificent dome, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper and scholarly pursuit. It was a place where knowledge was meticulously catalogued and quietly consumed. Poirot, with his usual disdain for the untidy, found the organized quietude deeply satisfying. We were here, at his insistence, to delve into Lord Ashworth's intellectual pursuits and, more specifically, to seek out any documents or correspondence he might have stored within the museum's vast archives. Hastings, Poirot had declared over breakfast, Lord Ashworth was a man of intellect. His life was not merely of coins and antiquities, but of research, of obscure histories. A man such as he would keep meticulous records, and a man who plans a discreet delivery that proves to be a fabrication, and a meeting that he fails to keep, is a man with secrets, and secrets often leave traces, even in the most academic of settings. We obtained permission to access certain private research records of Lord Ashworth, filed under an old grant from decades past. The librarian assigned to us was Miss Eleanor Vance, a woman of severe appearance, her grey hair pulled back in a tight bun, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose. She regarded us with a mixture of suspicion and grudging respect for Poirot's reputation. Lord Ashworth was a frequent patron, Miss Vance stated, her voice a dry rustle of paper. Dedicated scholar. Always very precise with his requests, never a page out of place. Poirot gave her a small, approving nod. Precision, mademoiselle, is a virtue. We are looking for anything unusual among his archived correspondence. Perhaps letters related to a collection of coins, or financial dealings, or even personal matters that might seem out of place. Miss Vance, after a sigh that seemed to echo the ancient tomes around us, led us to a quiet corner where several boxes of Lord Ashworth's papers had been retrieved. The sheer volume was daunting. I began to leaf through academic treatises and correspondence with other scholars about obscure Roman pottery fragments. Poirot, however, began to examine each box with an almost surgical deliberation, not merely reading, but sensing. After nearly an hour of silence, broken only by the rustle of paper and the occasional clearing of a throat from a distant scholar, Poirot let out a soft, "Aha!" He held up a brittle, yellowed envelope. Inside were not academic notes, but a series of passionate, if somewhat cryptic, letters, dated from 20 years prior. They were addressed to Lord Ashworth, but signed simply A.D. The language was effusive, poetic, full of longing and regret, speaking of a forbidden love and a hidden child. There was a particularly poignant line. Our love, like the night, must remain unseen, but our legacy, a precious bloom, will one day awaken. A secret love affair, I murmured, astonished. And a child. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Precisely, Hastings. Lord Ashworth, the staid antiquarian, had a hidden romantic past, and a child, a legacy. This, I think, is significant. The victim, she becomes more than a mere collection of dust and bones, no? She acquires a history, a soul. He continued to sift through the papers in the envelope. Tucked inside one of the letters was a faded photograph. A beautiful young woman with dark, expressive eyes, holding a baby. On the back, in faint, elegant script, were the initials A.D. and a date, followed by the single word, Annelise. Annelise, Poirot repeated, his brow furrowed in thought. And A.D., her full name perhaps. And the child, could this legacy be connected to the coins or to the Ashworth estate itself? Just then, Miss Vance returned, holding a small leather-bound volume. Pardon me, Monsieur Poirot, I recalled something. Lord Ashworth once left this book by mistake. It's a volume of obscure botanical engravings. Inside I found this. He asked me to keep it safe for him, claiming it was a personal bookmark. She handed Poirot a folded piece of parchment. It was a rough sketch of the Ashworth estate, but with several unusual annotations. A small X marked a spot near the back garden, and a series of cryptic symbols were drawn in the margin, resembling ancient runic script. Most strikingly, however, was a faint, almost invisible inscription at the bottom. When the clock stops at 9, the truth shall entwine. My jaw dropped. The clock and the garden. Poirot, this is extraordinary. Poirot's smile was grim. Extraordinary indeed, Hastings. A secret love, a hidden child, a cryptic map, and a prophecy about our very clock. It seems Lord Ashworth was a man of many layers, like an ancient manuscript revealing new truths with each turning page. The library, she has spoken. The quiet room, it has shouted a secret from the past, a secret that has now, perhaps, returned to claim its due. We must investigate this X in the garden. He carefully refolded the parchment, his eyes gleaming with a newfound understanding. The mystery was no longer a simple question of who or how, but a complex tapestry weaving together past passions, hidden lineage, and a meticulously planned deception. The stopped clock, once a mere curiosity, now pulsed with a new chilling significance. The next step, clearly, was to delve into the abandoned garden. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Abandoned Garden. The chill of the November morning permeated the air as we returned to Cavendish Square, specifically to the rear of Lord Ashworth's estate. The X on the parchment led us to a neglected patch of ground, choked with overgrown weeds and skeletal rose bushes, long past their bloom. It was a stark contrast to the manicured elegance of the front gardens, hinting at a forgotten corner, a place deliberately left to wilderness. The sunlight, weak and watery, struggled to pierce the dense canopy of ancient trees, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to dance with secrets. An abandoned garden, Poirot mused, surveying the desolate scene. A place for reflection, perhaps, or for burying something, literal or metaphorical. Note the contrast, Hastings. Lord Ashworth, a man of order and precision, allows this corner of his domain to fall into such disarray. Why? Jap, who had met us there, rubbed his chin. Could be he just didn't care for gardening, Poirot. Or maybe the funds for upkeep ran dry in his old age. Poirot merely shook his head. Non, mon ami. Nothing with Lord Ashworth was without reason. This neglect is deliberate, and the X suggests it is significant. We began to search the area indicated on the map. The ground was uneven, covered with a thick carpet of decaying leaves and tangled roots. The air was damp and earthy, carrying a faint scent of mildew and something else. A metallic tang that was vaguely familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. After a few minutes of careful probing, Poirot's eyes fixed on a cluster of thick ivy growing against an old stone wall, partially obscuring a section of crumbling brickwork. He gently pulled back the tenacious vines, revealing a small, almost invisible indentation in the wall. With a series of precise taps, he discovered a cleverly concealed, narrow compartment, barely large enough to admit a hand. "Aha!" he exclaimed, his voice hushed with triumph. "The hiding place Mrs. Thorne spoke of. And note the craftsmanship, Hastings. Designed to blend perfectly with the decay." Inside, wrapped in a piece of oilskin, was a heavy, small wooden box. Its surface was intricately carved, bearing the faint outlines of Egyptian hieroglyphs. With bated breath, Poirot opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was not a collection of ancient coins, but a single, exquisitely crafted silver locket. Its surface was smooth, unadorned, save for a delicate engraving of a single blooming night jasmine. "A locket," Jap muttered, clearly disappointed. "Not a hoard of valuable coins. What's the good of this, Poirot?" Poirot, however, ignored him, his gaze fixed on the locket. He carefully opened it. Inside, on one side, was a miniature portrait of the beautiful young woman from the photograph, Annelise. On the other, a tiny, exquisitely detailed miniature painting of a single, blooming night. Jasmine, its petals white against the darkness. "Annelise," Poirot whispered, his voice tinged with a rare sentimentality. "And her flower, the night-blooming jasmine, for which Lord Ashworth was so particular, as Mrs. Thorne told us. This is not about coins, Hastings. This is about sentiment, about love, about a legacy." Suddenly, a rustle in the undergrowth made us all jump. From behind a gnarled oak tree emerged a young man, dressed in fashionable but slightly disheveled clothing. His eyes were wide with a mixture of surprise and defiance. It was Mr. Edgar Thorne, Mrs. Thorne's nephew, the aggressive new money upstart mentioned by Silas Croft. "What are you doing here?" Thorne demanded, his voice thin with alarm. "This is private property. Are you the police? I was just looking for a rare orchid I heard was growing here." Jap stepped forward, his expression stern. "Mr. Thorne, you're trespassing, and as it happens, we are police, and this is Monsieur Poirot. We're investigating the death of Lord Ashworth." Thorne's face drained of colour. "Lord Ashworth? Dead? Good heavens, I had no idea." but I really was just looking for orchids. I'm a botanical enthusiast." He stammered, clearly trying to appear innocent. He used to have the most unique specimens. Poirot, however, noticed a small detail. A faint, almost imperceptible smudge of dark, metallic-flecked grime on the cuff of Thorne's otherwise clean jacket sleeve, identical to the one Poirot had observed on Silas Croft's shoe, and a faint scent of something bitter and almost medicinal clung to his clothes. "A botanical enthusiast, Monsieur Thorne?" Poirot asked, his eyes gleaming with suspicion. "Interesting. We found a small compartment here. What do you know of it?" Thorne immediately became agitated. "Compartment? I know nothing of any compartment. I just arrived." He gestured wildly at the overgrown garden. "I was told he had a rare specimen of the Helleborus niger in this very spot." "Helleborus niger," Poirot mused. "The Christmas rose, a beautiful but rather poisonous plant, no? But you seem more interested in the compartment, Monsieur Thorne, than in a flower that is not even in season." The young man's eyes darted nervously between us, then to the locket in Poirot's hand. His composure was rapidly crumbling. I must go. I have an important appointment." He turned to flee. Japp moved quickly, blocking his path. "Not so fast, Mr. Thorne. I think Monsieur Poirot has a few more questions for you." Poirot held up the locket. "This, Monsieur Thorne, speaks of a secret legacy, a hidden child. And you, I believe, have a vested interest in Lord Ashworth's estate, do you not? Perhaps more than mere orchids. And the faint scent of cyanide I detect on your person. That is not from any rose, monsieur." Thorne gasped, his face paling further, fear now openly expressed in his eyes. He made no further attempt to deny. The truth, like the bitter scent of almond, hung heavy in the damp air of the forgotten garden. The secrets of the past were now surfacing, tangled with the present. The hidden child and the legacy seemed to be converging, and Edgar Thorne, the ambitious nephew, was very much at the heart of it. The still clock, I realized, was not only marking a death, but also a long-held promise, now violently broken. Chapter 6. Canvas of Deception in Chelsea. The artistic enclave of Chelsea, with its bohemian charm and bustling studios, offered a vibrant, if slightly chaotic, atmosphere compared to the desolate garden. The afternoon sun, breaking through patches of cloud, cast a golden light on the colorful facades of the houses and the lively street scenes. Poirot, with his impeccable sense of order, found the artistic clutter a mild challenge to his sensibilities, yet acknowledged the insights that could be gleaned from such creative environments. Our visit was prompted by a newly discovered entry in Lord Ashworth's private diary, referencing a commission of significant personal value with a reclusive artist known as Monsieur Dubois. "Mon ami," Poirot explained as we approached a studio tucked away in a quiet mews, its large windows giving a glimpse of canvases and easels. Lord Ashworth was a man of logic and order, but also of hidden passions. The discovery of the locket and the letters to Annelise suggest a deeper, more emotional side. An artist, especially one commissioned for a personal piece, might have been privy to his intimate thoughts, perhaps even his anxieties. The studio, when we entered, was a riot of color and controlled chaos. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against walls, pots of paint littered tables, and the air was thick with the scent of turpentine and linseed oil. Monsieur Dubois, a man of intense gaze and wild graying hair, was hunched over a canvas, dabbing at it with a feverish concentration. He wore a paint-splattered smock, and his hands, though stained, were surprisingly delicate. "Monsieur Dubois?" Poirot inquired, navigating a maze of easels. "Hercule Poirot. This is Captain Hastings. We are investigating the unfortunate demise of Lord Ashworth." Dubois slowly turned, his eyes the color of deep cobalt fixing on Poirot. "Ashworth? Dead? Mon Dieu, what a tragedy." He was a patron of considerable discernment, a true connoisseur, even if his tastes often ran to the melancholic. "Indeed," Poirot said, observing the artist's studio. "We understand you were commissioned for a piece of significant personal value for Lord Ashworth. Can you elaborate on this?" Dubois sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yes. A curious commission. Lord Ashworth, usually so reserved, became quite passionate about it. He wanted a triptych, 3 panels. The first, a vibrant depiction of a night-blooming jasmine under a starry sky. The second, a serene portrait of a young woman with dark hair and striking eyes, almost ethereal. And the third was the most intriguing. A clock, an ornate gilded mantel clock, frozen at 9 o'clock, resting on a pedestal amidst a desolate, overgrown garden, shrouded in mist. My breath caught. The clock and the garden. Poirot, this is all coming together. Poirot's eyes gleamed with an almost fierce satisfaction. "Indeed, Hastings. Monsieur Dubois, did Lord Ashworth explain the symbolism of this rather specific commission?" "Only in fragments," Dubois replied, picking up a palette knife. "He spoke of time stopping for love, and a legacy unearthed by the hand of fate. He was very insistent about the details of the clock, the precise time, the gilded finish. And the night jasmine, he said, represented a beauty born of shadow, a secret flourishing in the dark." "And the young woman?" Poirot pressed. "Did he give you a name or perhaps a photograph?" Dubois nodded, pointing to a small framed sketch on a cluttered shelf. He provided this. An old photograph, rather faded. He said her name was Annelise. It was the same photograph we had found in the British Museum. Poirot studied it again, then looked around the studio. His gaze settled on a large draped canvas in a corner, slightly hidden. "And the triptych?" Poirot asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Is it completed, Monsieur Dubois?" Dubois hesitated. A shadow crossed his face. "Almost. The first 2 panels are finished. The third, the clock panel. I was still working on the finer details. Lord Ashworth was very particular about it. He wanted a specific type of paint, a very rare pigment to capture the ethereal quality of the mist. He even brought me a small vial of it himself, just 2 days ago." "A vial of paint?" Poirot's ears perked up. "What kind of pigment?" "He called it midnight sigh," Dubois explained, a hint of artistic drama in his voice. Said it was a unique compound he'd acquired from a rather obscure chemical supplier in East London. Very rich, almost black, but with a surprising luminosity when mixed properly. He said it was the color of deep secrets. Poirot approached the draped canvas. "May I see the third panel, Monsieur Dubois?" Dubois assented, pulling back the sheet with a flourish. There, beautifully rendered, was the gilded clock, its hands frozen at 9, sitting on a moss-covered pedestal in a misty, overgrown garden. But as Poirot leaned closer, he noticed a faint, almost invisible inscription painted in the same dark, luminous pigment along the base of the clock in the painting. It was a series of symbols identical to those on the parchment map from the British Museum. "The runic script," I exclaimed, recognizing the symbols. "But what do they mean?" Poirot's expression was grim. "They are not runic, Hastings. They are a coded message, an ancient alchemical cipher. And if my intuition is correct, they spell out a name that connects our hidden child, our ambitious nephew, and perhaps the true legacy Lord Ashworth sought to protect." He turned back to Dubois. "This midnight sigh pigment, monsieur. Did Lord Ashworth tell you of its composition or its properties?" Dubois shook his head. "No, only that it was unique and rarely seen, and rather acrid if you get too close. I keep it well sealed." Poirot nodded, his gaze distant, processing. The color of deep secrets indeed. The artist, he sees the beauty, the mystery. But the detective, he sees the truth lurking beneath the surface, no? This painting, Monsieur Dubois, is more than art. It is a testament and perhaps a confession. The Chelsea studio, once a place of creative expression, now felt charged with an unsettling revelation. The clock on the canvas, stopped at 9, seemed to echo the silence of the one in Lord Ashworth's study, holding its painted secrets just as tightly. The intricate web of clues, the telegram, the empty warehouse, the locket, the botanical sketch, and now the painting, was tightening. Poirot's little grey cells were working at an astonishing pace, weaving these disparate threads into a tapestry of truth. The final act was approaching. Chapter 7. The Revelation at the Blue Orchid Café. The appointed hour arrived on a bright, cold afternoon, the kind that promised crisp winter days ahead. Poirot had arranged for all the key players to gather at the Blue Orchid Café, a fashionable establishment known for its excellent coffee and discretion, located just off Piccadilly. The café, usually bustling, had been specially reserved for our small tense group. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows, illuminating the polished wood and velvet upholstery, but doing little to dispel the palpable tension in the air. Seated around a large round table were Inspector Japp, a nervous Mrs. Gable, a bewildered Mrs. Thorne, a sullen Edgar Thorne, and a visibly uncomfortable Silas Croft. Poirot sat opposite them, radiating an air of calm authority, a small silver locket resting on the table beside his cup of precisely measured hot chocolate. I, as usual, sat beside him, preparing to record every nuance. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we are here today to unravel the mystery of the clock that died at 9. Lord Ashworth's death was not a natural passing, nor a simple robbery. It was a meticulously planned act, driven by a motive as ancient as humanity itself, greed and the desire to control a legacy." He picked up the locket. This locket, found hidden in Lord Ashworth's neglected garden, reveals a profound secret. It contains a miniature of Annelise Dubois, the love of Lord Ashworth's life and the mother of his illegitimate child. This child he wished to protect, to acknowledge, but also to keep hidden from the public eye due to societal pressures of the time. Poirot paused, letting this sink in. The legacy Lord Ashworth wished to unearth was not a collection of ancient coins, but his rightful heir. He had discovered the existence of this child, now an adult, and planned to amend his will, making them the primary beneficiary of his considerable estate. This, mes amis, is the motive. He then turned his gaze to Edgar Thorne. "Monsieur Edgar Thorne, you are the nephew of Mrs. Thorne, yes? But you are also more than that. You are the son of Annelise Dubois, Lord Ashworth's son. You are his illegitimate child, born of a forbidden love. He had only recently discovered your true parentage, not through your aunt, but through his own meticulous research into the Dubois family, and was preparing to formally recognize you and bestow upon you his fortune." Edgar Thorne gasped, his face paling, a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. My father, Lord Ashworth?" "Precisely," Poirot affirmed, "and this knowledge you discovered. Not from Lord Ashworth directly, but from a confidential letter he had drafted to his solicitor outlining his intentions. You stumbled upon it, perhaps while trying to ferret out other family secrets or financial dealings as your ambition dictated." Poirot then turned to Silas Croft. "Monsieur Croft, you were not at the Athenaeum that fateful evening. You were at your private warehouse in Wapping, waiting. Lord Ashworth had contacted you, not for a transaction, but to retrieve something. A small, lead-lined box containing a vial of a rare, fast-acting poison, a variant of cyanide which he had, in his youth, used for his botanical research. He had acquired it from an obscure contact as a fail-safe measure, a means of ending his own life should his health fail catastrophically and painfully. He had intended to use it to protect his legacy from those who might exploit his true heir, should he reveal his identity too soon or fall ill. He spoke of midnight sigh to Monsieur Dubois, describing its dark, luminous quality. This was not paint pigment, but a poetic reference to the poison which he had intended to dispose of. Croft stammered. I just went to collect the coins. He changed the rendezvous. No, monsieur, Poirot corrected gently. Lord Ashworth knew of your unscrupulous dealings and your desire to acquire his estate by any means. He set a trap, sending Mrs. Thorne's delivery boy to an empty warehouse, knowing you would be there, waiting for what you thought was a valuable delivery. You see, Lord Ashworth intended to catch you in the act of trying to steal the supposed coins, and in doing so, expose your true character to Edgar, his son. But you, Monsieur Croft, deduced his intention. You saw the opportunity to frame Edgar and secure the estate for yourself through another means, by arranging for Edgar to discover the poison and be seen as the culprit. He continued, his voice now firm. On Monday evening, Lord Ashworth invited Edgar to his study. He intended to reveal his true parentage and his plans. But Edgar, fueled by ambition and the desire to accelerate his inheritance, decided to take matters into his own hands. He had already discovered the poison in the warehouse, perhaps having followed Croft there and suspected its connection to his assumed father. When Lord Ashworth offered him a celebratory cocoa, Edgar added the poison. He knew Lord Ashworth's precise habits, his love of routine. Lord Ashworth collapsed, Poirot explained, his gaze piercing. The clock, he kept it wound, always. As he fell, his hand, in a final, dying gesture, reached out, not to stop the clock, but to wind it. But his strength failed, and his hand, instead of fully winding, merely brushed the pendulum, knocking it slightly, causing it to halt precisely at 9 o'clock. A final, desperate attempt to signal the time of his true last moments to someone who would understand. A symbol of a time that stopped for his love, his legacy. He wanted to signal that his true, early meeting that morning, the one he spoke of to Mrs. Gable, was with the poison and with death itself, not a business arrangement. Silence descended upon the café, broken only by the clinking of a distant teacup. Edgar Thorne, his face a mask of horror and despair, slowly crumpled in his seat, the weight of his actions crushing him. Silas Croft, too, looked utterly defeated, the meticulous smudge of dockside grime and the false alibi now damning evidence. The midnight sigh, pigment, Monsieur Dubois, Poirot concluded, turning to the artist, was the poison itself, disguised as paint by Lord Ashworth in his younger days. Stored carefully, he had intended to dispose of it, but fate intervened. So, Japp said, shaking his head, the old man was trying to protect his son, and the son killed him for what he thought was an inheritance he had to steal. Exactly, Japp. Poirot nodded. A tragic irony. The clock, she died at 9, not to mark a murder, but a final, desperate attempt at communication. A silent witness to a son's betrayal, born of misguided ambition. The little grey cells, they showed me that the simplest explanation is not always the truth. Sometimes it is the most complex tapestry of human emotion, history, and deception. The case was closed. The elegant café, which had been the setting for the revelation of such dark truths, slowly returned to its gentle hum. Poirot, with a satisfied sigh, sipped his hot chocolate, his eyes twinkling. Another triumph of order over chaos, of the mind over the murky depths of human nature. Thank you for joining us on this journey.